So I was studiously looking for jokes to start the talk with, and the best I can do is on Facebook, there is Your Mom is So Berkeley. If you don't belong to that group yet, you probably should. Also, the other sort of slightly amusing thing, on not much of a joke, is that it turns out that the most common, particularly female names in Berkeley, are named after streets in Berkeley. And I'll bring this topic up a little later when I talk about why our streets are named the way they are. So today I'm going to talk about historic districts in Berkeley and using an example which comes from our own neighborhood, but which is, I guess the best you could say is it's in progress. We haven't made that much progress, but we spent quite a lot of time making the progress we made. So what's a historic district? It's a group of buildings, usually a neighborhood, where the buildings relate to one another historically, architecturally, culturally, or archaeologically. In our case, the archaeology is not as important. In any case, these neighborhoods have a cohesive and sometimes unique quality, and there is architectural diversity, but there's a certain thread across the different houses and parts of the neighborhood. So there actually are at least three, actually there are quite a bit more, historic districts already designated in Berkeley. There's La Loma Park, the Civic Center, and Panoramic Way. And I'll be showing some images of La Loma Park and Panoramic Way. But if you want more information about the local regulations regarding landmarks and historic districts, you can go to that website that's on. I'll be circulating the PowerPoint so you can click through if you want to, but that's the Landmarks Preservation Commission. And it turns out one of our attendees was on the Landmarks Commission, so you can ask him about that. That's Tim. Okay, so here are two Panoramic Way houses. One on 66 Panoramic Way, built in 1912, designed by Julia Morgan, been altered considerably since she designed it, but it's still got that shingle-style Berkeley look to it. And at 38 Panoramic Way, we have a house designed by Walter Stylberg. In La Loma Park, there are two, at least two, quite a few more, Bernard Maybeck designed houses, the Lawson House, built in 1908, and the Mathewson Studio, built in 1915. The main advantages of designating historic districts is one thing that matters a lot to property owners is enhancing their property values, but it also allows them to perhaps pay for repairs and upgrades. And the underlying value is preserving the historic character of the buildings and the neighborhood. Now, besides improving the appearance and livability of the neighborhood, it also allows owners to invest in energy efficiency and other environmental upgrades while providing a vehicle for community education in local history and culture. And I think you'll see that potential as I give more specific examples. So now, not everybody likes this idea, and in trying to create historic districts, you'll find that people resist it for a variety of reasons. In Berkeley, particularly, people are concerned about the supply of affordable housing, and so some of the critics of historic districts think that the more historic districts we have, the fewer available residences for low-income owners. And a more general criticism is that it simply freezes the housing stock, can't build new buildings. These are both actually incorrect in our case, but I'd be happy to talk about my counter-criticisms to the criticism. Another factor that figures in people's approval of applications for registration is that you do have to go to the Landmark Commission in Berkeley to get approval for alteration of the exterior of the building, particularly alterations that could alter the appearance or the historical character of the building. And that somewhat reduces your property rights, although you still have to go to the Planning Commission to get approval for repairs. It just means you have one more step to go before you get to the Planning Commission. Okay, who decides? In the city of Berkeley, the main decider is the Landmarks Preservation Commission. They get feedback also, or they get information from the Planning Commission and the bureaucrats in the city. At the state of California level, it's the Office of Historic Preservation, and at the federal government level, the registrar is the National Register of Historic Places. Now, what we learned in trying to figure out how to go through this is that the state office will help you get a national registry, National Historic Places registered. And once you've done that, you can return to the local officials, and they're much more likely to approve once they've seen the imprimatur of the state and the federal government. So it could be a mistake to go right to the local government. And I won't talk about that in detail unless you want to hear more about that. But in any case, even at the local level, once you want to get designated as a historic district, more than 50% of your households have to approve of the local designation. So that's why you have to gather a consensus among your neighbors before you actually can get it designated. Okay, so what are the steps for doing this? First of all, you have to look at the whole thing and see whether it makes sense and whether you can make a compelling case. And often neighbors form a kind of task force. They specialize in particular tasks so that the whole thing could get done. Often actually fairly difficult in the sense that you have to not just know about the history, but the way that the houses are laid out. You have to know about the history of each house, architects, who built the house, who lived in it over the period that you're studying. And often you can get quite a lot of help from other organizations, and I'll talk about that a bit in the more. There's a lot of information gathering involved, and once you've got your information, you then can set the boundary lines for the district, and that makes it a lot easier to apply for the designation. The design review process is not that lengthy or difficult, but it usually is a document of like 40, 50 pages, maybe more, depending on your neighborhood. And it has to be fairly detailed, and often you need to consult experts. But once you've had your district designated, you have to keep educating the residents and the neighbors nearby about what are the advantages of historic districts. Okay. So local resources include the Berkeley Architectural Heritage Association, or BAHA, the Berkeley Historical Society, the Friends of Fountain and Walk, the Berkeley Historic Preservation Projects, which is a much smaller group, and obviously the Hillside Club. And I need to not only thank Daniela Thompson, who's helped us with our ideas, but also Trish Hawthorne, who was one of the founders of BAHA. Okay, so this is the example I'm going to talk about. It's 2 blocks of Yosemite Road, 1800 and 1900 blocks. On one side is the Alameda, on the other side is the Arlington. And I can show you a picture that you can actually see of the 2 endpoints, which are little parklets. And the parklets have urns in them. And the urns are not the original urns that were in the neighborhood. They were actually reestablished by a committee that Trish Hawthorne was the co-president of. But they do reflect the original intention of the builders of this neighborhood, and I'll talk about that in a bit. So some of the most distinctive features of this neighborhood, and I think a lot of other North Berkeley neighborhoods also share this, is besides the urns, we have some very beautiful boulders, rhyolite boulders, that were cast off by our local volcano, and luckily have been preserved by the planners who set out the plots and the streets and the parks in the neighborhood. And I'll talk about that more too. So the Yosemite, 2 blocks of Yosemite Road are part of a larger area called Thousand Oaks. This neighborhood was developed after the earthquake in 1906, and it grew quite a bit after the establishment of regular ferry and rail service to Berkeley, to San Francisco from Berkeley. A lot of people, of course, were escaping the effects of the earthquake, and that's when we saw one push. Another push was after the fire of 1923, so I'll talk about that a bit more too. But the guy who developed this thing is a guy named John Hopkins Spring. He purchased the land, I think in 1909. Do you guys know why so many streets in Berkeley are named after counties in California? That's very good. We had an unsuccessful attempt to make Berkeley into the state capital. And as part of that attempt, the city founders renamed a lot of streets to reflect the counties of California. It didn't work. So in 1909, we're not the capital of California, in case you didn't know. And the other story that I don't know how true it is that John Hopkins Spring won some money in a domino game or a card game. But yeah, something like that. So part of the money that came from purchasing the land. Now, I need to go back and talk about that. This is required in Berkeley to say, this is Ohlone land. This was Native American land first, and then it was Mexican American land, and then it became a property that could be owned by non-Mexican Americans and non-Native Americans, and one of those, in this case, was John Hopkins Spring. Anyway, Spring hired a fellow named Mark Daniels, who lived on Yosemite Road, and I'll be talking about him more, to lay out the streets and to set the lot boundaries for the neighborhood, which he then intended to develop as a real estate development. So one of the things that Spring wanted to do was to attract a kind of hoity-toity crowd. He didn't want low-income people to move to the neighborhood. So the lots, some of the lots, the early lots were large, and the houses that he had built on the property were luxurious for the time. After 1923, the lot sizes were halved, I believe. I don't know whether that's historically accurate, but in any case, the houses built after 23 are quite different in size and in style, and I'll talk about that in a bit too. Okay, so one factor in all this is the ability to get back and forth from Berkeley to San Francisco, and a key aspect of that was the ferry that went to the key system terminal. There's the terminal. There's Berkeley. And the line that goes up this way, that's the one that took us to Thousand Oaks. And once you got to Thousand Oaks on the key line, then I guess you could take streetcars like the Arlington streetcar that's in that picture there. The planting in between the streets, that was where the streetcar was. Is that right? I think that's right. Okay. So here's a picture of John Hopkins Spring. That's his wife in the middle. He did not stay married to her for many years after he moved to the house that's on the right there, which is a very large mansion designed by John Hudson Thomas and completed in 1914. It's reinforced concrete, I believe, is the main construction. Just sold for about $5 million, I believe. Read Daniela Thompson's stuff about John Hopkins Spring and the mansion and there's a whole scandal connected with Spring and his infidelities and why they divorced. And the lady there on the lower, below his wife, his ex-wife, was, I believe, convicted of murder. So there's lots of juicy stuff about the Springs. I could go on, but I won't. Now, Spring was one of the big developers of the Claremont Hotel area and the Claremont district, and some of these guys were his partners. So these are the four main real estate developers, other than Spring, of Berkeley: Duncan McDuffie, Francis Marion Borack Smith. I think the domino game was with Frank Havens, I'm not sure. And there's Louis Titus, who's the fourth guy in the group. Okay. So here's an ad for the Thousand Oaks neighborhood that was advertised by the Newell Murdoch Company, which was the company that Spring basically delegated the job of selling the lots that were available. You can see in advertising it, they were featuring things like the live oak trees, the Tudor-style house that's shown in the ad there. The boulders are also sort of vaguely hinted at there, but you can see another bigger boulder there. And also, the theme of the urns goes back to the original marketing of the neighborhood. The inspiration was Maxfield Parrish, and there's one of the Maxfield Parrish, I think it's the Garden of Allah painting that inspired the urns. Spring hired Mark Daniels, who was a landscape engineer, to help to lay out the streets, and he basically agreed with other architects of the time, John Galen Howard and Frederick Law Olmsted, that it would be a good idea to preserve the natural habitat as much as possible, especially the boulders. And also, Daniels was key in creating the Great Stoneface Park, which is right in the middle of the two blocks that I'm talking about. Daniels himself built a house designed by architect A.W. Smith at 1864 Yosemite in 1911 for himself and his wife, and there's a picture of his wife. That's the house. And it is a beautiful house, and it has a beautiful location, and it's surrounded by enormous boulders, and it's a Swiss chalet-style house, and it has wonderful views, and it's just a great place. Daniels designed the landscaping for his own house, so he had a hand in designing at least the property. So it turns out that Spring had three daughters who married various people, including Robert Newell of the Newell Murdoch Real Estate Company. Gertrude was the first to marry. She married at age 14 or 15, I think. Another scandal. And at first, Mr. Spring didn't want to condone this marriage with an actor, believe it or not, named George Friend. But then George Friend joined the real estate company, and everything was forgiven. Noble Newsom, another architect who built houses on the Yosemite Road, married the daughter Anne, and so these are the three houses that are associated with those three marriages. By the way, I believe the land itself was donated by Spring for these couples, so they basically just had to bear the cost of constructing the house. So the Newell house was designed by William Knowles, built in 1910, the earliest of the three. It's kind of an English manor style. The house that was built for George Friend and Gertrude was built in 1915. I don't know who the designer was for that one, but it's a kind of Tudor style. And the house for Noble Newsom and Anne was built in 1921, and it was designed by Sidney and Noble Newsom, who were architects themselves. Okay, so Murdoch, who is this the right Murdoch? I remember, Daniel. No, it's not the right Murdoch. Okay. It's with a K instead of an H. Anyway, this is one of the early houses built on Yosemite at 1874. It was designed by John Hudson Thomas. There's one Julia Morgan house at 1962, owned by Trish Hawthorne. There's 5 John Hudson Thomas houses on the 2 blocks. There's the A.W. Smith house that I already talked about. There are 3 houses designed by Sidney and Noble Newsom. There's 1 house designed by Walter Stylberg, 1 by William Knowles, and there's a sort of mid-century modern house built by Clarence Tantow Jr. Actually, several other houses on the 2 blocks that are architect design, but I didn't want to list them all. So here's really, in many ways, the pearl of the whole 2 blocks is the 1962 Yosemite house called the McGregor House. McGregor, I believe, was a mining engineer. Built in 1923, it was made a Berkeley City landmark in 2002, and there's a picture of Julia Morgan up on the upper right. 2 views of the house. It's a quite beautiful house, very symmetrical, as you can see. Here's 4 of the John Hudson Thomas houses, and these are all pretty much storybook style, as you call it. So one of the things I'm trying to get across in this talk is the diversity of architectural styles, but also the kind of the way they relate to one another. And it's basically, even though they're different in style, there's a kind of harmony to it all, partly because they're old. So these houses are mostly built in the 1920s. Another John Hudson Thomas house is not actually addressed on Yosemite Road, but faces it. It's the Sill House, and built in 1913 for the owner of Sill's grocery store. And it's quite a beautiful house. I think that upper story was built later. I think that's right. But anyway, and then there are the 3 houses by Sidney and Noble Newsom, all Tudor style. Then there's the William Knowles house I talked about before, currently owned by 2 Google engineers. It may be true for your neighborhoods too, that there's quite a lot of Silicon Valley here. These are old pictures of the Knowles house, and those are the original urns that were the house is right there. So almost all the original urns disappeared or broke or whatever. And there's only one remaining, and it's actually not on Yosemite Road, it's on the Alameda. But then they use that as the model for reconstructing and re-establishing urns in the neighborhood. Pretty much the rest of the houses that I didn't talk about already were built on smaller lots, including our house, which is right over there. That's our house, 1811. And you can see, again, the variation in style, but a lot of arts and crafts, cottage style. The one in the middle is New England colonial. And then we've got some on 1900, which are basically Mediterranean or Spanish colonial. And a lot of these gables, sort of Tudor-ish. And then we've got our mid-century modern houses. Some of them are architect designed. This one on the lower right is by Clarence Tantow, who's a fairly well-known architect. And Reisberg, I think, is this house. It's a very modern-looking house. The initial owners were of a certain part of society. We got 2 people from the retail merchandising area, from Hink & Son and from Hale's department store, and 1, 2, 3, 4 engineers, including the one for our house. He was a refrigeration engineer. There's obviously a sort of commercial and engineering character to some of the early owners. In making the case for a historic district, we have to talk about the historical personalities as well. And so one of the better-known people was Saul Zaentz, who was the owner of Tower Records and also the producer of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. L. John Harris, who was really a character. Fantasy Records, I'm sorry, yeah. I don't know why I screwed that one up, sorry. And L. John Harris, who first worked for Chez Panisse and then went to found the Cheese Board. I believe that's his. Well, anyway, Peter Kyne was a popular novelist at the time. That's his picture over there. I don't think anybody's ever heard of him since. Harold Hastings Eby was a shipping executive. Lida Munson-Hume was a suffragist. That's her there. Blanche Morse was one of the founders of the local League of Women Voters. That's her. She's wearing a suffragette hat, it looks like. And then there's Trish Hawthorne, who I already talked about. So basically, that's my presentation. I did want to give you a kind of progress report on where we are so far with this idea of creating a historic district for the Yosemite Road blocks. We've kind of considered the whole package. We're trying to make a case for it. Not out there yet. Did not form a task force. Trying to build public support, basically by giving talks like this. But also, we've had walking tours. The Berkeley Historical Society sponsored a walking tour. It was quite well attended. We've given a couple of public talks, as I said, other than this one. We work with Baja and the Berkeley Historical Society and others, and we have set the district boundary drives, but we haven't gone through the design review process, nor have we gotten the buy-in of more than 50% of the houses in our neighborhood. So the one reason I wanted to give this talk was I wanted people in the Hillside Club and others who are here to think about whether they would like to do this. It's not easy to do it, but it seems to me pretty worthwhile. One of the reasons we moved back to Berkeley after going to graduate school here and then leaving for Indiana for 30 years was the wonderful neighborhoods here and the wonderful character of those neighborhoods, which I think is worth preserving. And with that, I'll end, take questions.
How many neighborhoods are there?
How many neighborhoods? That is a really good question. I would think, so if you just talk about North Berkeley, let's see, there's North Bray, there's, really you have to think of Thousand Oaks as kind of but actually it's broken up into bunches of little neighborhoods. There's the Indian Rock area. I mean, I don't think anybody's ever counted them. And the definition of the boundaries of neighborhoods is going to sort of be up to the residents to figure out, what is my neighborhood and do I want to make the case for this being historic or not? Yes?
I don't know if you're aware of the Big Tents that are better informed.
Everybody here more or less? No. Okay, let me repeat the gist. There is a political support for getting rid of the whole idea that neighborhoods have special character, and one of the forms that is taken is to take entire Berkeley territory and eliminate the single-family dwelling zoning. And so apparently South Berkeley does have that kind of zoning, but North Berkeley doesn't. So that's one area of struggle. Another is that the state has mandated that Berkeley increase the amount of housing by, I think, 7,000, somewhere. Huh? I hadn't heard that we'd met the goal, but one of the things that's been happening is they put multifamily dwellings along the transit routes, and that was kind of a compromise that the local politicians have made to increase the density of housing only in certain areas, but to leave the neighborhoods with single-family dwellings alone. Another fight is about ADUs. So at the state level, they're trying to basically mandate that you can have up to 4 ADUs on your property. That obviously won't work for our neighborhoods because we don't have the space. But nevertheless, that's the idea that a developer can make a single-family dwelling property into a multi-family piece of property through the creation of more, authorizing more ADUs, and to do it without the kind of review process that used to exist for that kind of construction. Yes?
Yeah, and just a handful of months back, the city council meeting was very controversial at that point, and I haven't heard.
Yeah, one of the arguments against rezoning or eliminating zoning or creating more multifamily dwellings is the already tight parking situation and the difficulty of fire trucks to move through streets that have parking on both sides, for example, and Yosemite has that example. And the fire department, interestingly enough, has kind of taken that view also, because they don't want to be in a situation where they can't fight fires because they can't get the truck in and out quickly. And I think besides fires, there's the whole fires, there's also the issue of earthquakes and other things and landslides and so forth. So there are a lot of reasons to resist this idea of building more housing, and particularly building low-income housing everywhere in Berkeley to meet some quota that the state has done. Insurance, yes. So far, not much of either. To be honest, there are a couple neighbors, including some that are in this room, who've been extremely supportive. But then there's one guy in particular who thinks that it's terrible that us privileged folks in North Berkeley are preventing low-income people from moving here. He's from the 1900 block, and he's a lawyer, and he's very liberal, and which hurts me because I'm very liberal also. And I'm thinking, am I on the wrong side or something? But I don't feel that way. I mean, well, yeah, go ahead, Danielle.
Among the supporters, are any who own the...
Okay, the question is, why not encourage individual property owners to apply for landmark status, which is usually for a specific house or property around the house, as opposed to the district where you have to get more consensus. And that is a good point. And in fact, we do have that one landmarked house, Trish's house, but we have two prospective ones, the Mark Daniels house and the Knowles house. And the problem is the owners of those two houses are currently at cross purposes for reasons completely spurious. But in principle, one of the other issues, if you're a new owner and you bought your house at a very high price, the Mills Act is a very nice inducement because you get a tax rebate on the cost of repairing the house. Not a huge one, it's like 30%, I think. But that could be quite a nice draw for somebody getting their house landmarked or part of a historic district. But so we're pursuing both those avenues at the same time, and if you're interested in doing this yourself, you might think about that alternative. Questions? Yes.
Mark Daniels was the first head of the National Park System.
Right.
And he helped, if you can imagine this.
He also apparently had something to do with Monterey and through the, what's the drive there? 17-mile drive. Yeah, he helped to lay out that. So he's quite a guy. He did his training at UC Berkeley. He was a fairly young guy at the time. When the picture I showed you of him with the house that they built, basically he was in his 20s. So he was going to go on to pretty great stuff.
But that's why this Yosemite Road.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just. Wait a minute. Is there a Yosemite County?
No.
No. Okay, very good. I did not know that. Very good. Yes? Oh, Yes, yes. It's the Office of Historic Preservation. And we talked to this really nice guy. He was a historian. And, at first he kind of gave us the bare minimum. But then when we told him what work we'd already done, then he got really serious. And he said, we'd love to see that proposal. So it was very encouraging. Quite different from the kind of feedback we got from the one time we went to the Landmark Commission to talk about the building of a new structure at 930 Indian Rock. And that's another talk. Any other questions, comments? Yes?
I'm sort of wondering whether they would question the uniqueness of this district.
Yeah, I mean, we in problem, if you're in a neighborhood with 10 Maybach houses, it's probably going to be a lot easier to make the case, and not everybody knows the architects like John Hudson Thomas, although I think he's becoming much more well-known in Berkeley anyway, and maybe elsewhere. And Julia Morgan is no problem either. But then there's the diversity itself, and you say, well, where's the cohesiveness? But I think there is if you look at the history as a whole, it does have a kind of cohesion, and it represents the different stages of the development of the city in a very nice way. It could be very useful for educating people about the history, not just of the city, but also what came before it. I mean, I think the one thing that irks me is that San Francisco has a lot more historic districts than we do.
For a good reason. You know what the reason is?
No.
They don't have this requirement. Is Berkeley?
That's a Berkeley statute, a Berkeley, what do you call them? Requirement, regulation.
In the LPO.
And there was some attempt to change that, wasn't there?
I tried.
Yeah, that's right, Danielle. Yeah, but I think you weren't the only person to try to change it. Yes?
You should mention the San Pablo project in Margaretta.
Yeah, have you heard of Margaretta Lovell, any of you? Yeah, well, she's UC Berkeley professor who's been studying neighborhoods for possible historic districts also. And two that she's looked at was San Pablo Park, which is a whole neighborhood sort of in the West Berkeley off of San Pablo. And then, what was the other one? North Shattuck, right. It's North Bray. And actually, Joan and I helped Margaretta collect data. We used Baja Resources and others. And so if that's an ongoing effort that if you're interested in this sort of activity, you might talk to Margaretta Lovell about. She's a little discouraged at the moment because she hasn't yet gotten buy-in from either San Pablo Park residents or from the other area. And so if you're interested, talk to her about it. Anything else? Oh. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
The city of Berkeley is not very helpful. I have a house that had an in-law built a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I